Hi and good afternoon. My name is Nico Heller, and this is Reboot 2030, the Democracies Schools YouTube channel. We started Reboot 2030 about 6 months ago with the intention and the ambition to start a sort of a longer-term dialogue with change makers, innovators, thinkers, activists, transformational leaders, people who want to try to turn the sort of the global crises that we're experiencing at so many levels at the moment round for the benefit of a better world. Over the past 6 months, we've covered a whole host of different topics, including topics related to climate change, to empowerment and participation, to Europe and the EU, to global competition and cooperation, and last but not least, to federalism and democracy. Today, we have a very different kind of person joining us, an artist, an architect, one of the leading architects, in fact, currently or for some time now working in the UK. A lady called Lenka Petrakova. She works for Zaha Hadid Architects, one of the leading architectural firms, really, you know, in not just in London, but really, I would almost sort of say in Europe. And she has built and has worked, you know, across a number of continents. She's worked in the US, she's worked in Europe, and of course, she has worked in her home country, where she originally is from Slovakia. She's trained both as an architect and as an engineer, so she brings various kind of aspects to her craft, and she is working currently, or has been working on the side, on a really ambitious project which has drawn my attention because it looks at the future, a future that is potentially quite bleak, in quite a positive way. She is working on a thing she calls the 8th continent. It's a massive, a huge floating station. It floats in the ocean, and it's like a large vacuum cleaner. It hoovers up debris and cleans the water, but it does a lot more. So I see that Lenka has actually arrived. She's in the waiting room, so I will invite her in. And basically ask her to say a few more words about herself. There she's coming on. I think I can see her coming on. Is she there?
Hello.
Lenka, hi. You need to turn your camera on.
Yes.
There you
Hello.
are.
It's me. Hi, hello.
Well, thank you very much for making time in your busy schedule to talk to me about the 8th continent. Let me tell you a little bit first about the format of Reboot 2030. We think of it very much as a conversation. So, and we think of it as a conversation of two people that are essentially on the same side. So, you know, you don't have to expect any assassinations or any sniping from the sidelines. This is really about trying to understand where you're coming from and what this ambitious project, the 8th continent, is all about. I think because it's so hard to really get a sense of how ambitious this really is without seeing it, we're sort of breaking with protocol, because usually we don't want PowerPoint presentations on our channel because it's so trite and done. But in this case, we do make an exception, and I have prepared this, and I can share this screen. So I'll try and see how that works. We should both be staying there, and we should be able to, yeah, there we are. And we can both see this. So this is basically a sort of the still, and there's a film prepared for our viewers. And what I suggest is, because it's a silent movie, as it were, I let it run, and maybe you can just talk over it and say a few things about, you know, the different aspects of the project. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's see.
Great. So thank you very much for having me. And I will introduce to you and you know, to all of the viewers, the project, the 8th continent. And I'm very happy you could have break the protocol and show the movie, because as a design project is, very important to show the actual design and the 3D of it. So now we are looking at the outside of the 8th continent, what is a floating station that it's aiming to clean the ocean and prepare and offer an interdisciplinary platform for research of the oceans and for education about what impact we as humans have on the ocean. The problem and the problem that the station is focusing on is the plastic waste and in general the waste in the oceans because they are really heavily polluted, and we don't really realize the extent of the pollution because the oceans are so far away from us, and this was problem for so many years that we couldn't have seen the problem that is in the ocean. But now, thanks to the satellites and the research, we can know a bit more. So the station is having these extended arms with which the station is collecting and navigating the trash from the ocean, from the surface, and it is bringing it towards the center of the station where the water is sucked in and the water is purified and cleared, and either it is returned to the ocean or it is further used for supporting different processes on board. And the station as a unique hub that it's for researchers is as well using this water for the processes, I said, to actually be able to support the research community. So on the station, we don't have only the barrier that is navigating the water and the waste from the water to the collector, but we have as well water tanks in which we can as well, grow algae, we can fish farm, or we can desalinate the water and use the water for planting, for hydroponic planting in the greenhouses. And with this, we use the clean water to really prepare and harvest nutrition for the crew. So the last part that we now see in the blue is actually the part for people, for the crew to live on board, and it is a part where they can where a crew up to 50 members can live and can support this can support the station as well technically wise, but can as well support through the research, the knowledge about the oceans, the pollution that is in it, how we affect them, but at the same time study how they are cleaned through the process of the cleaning water of the station. Now we are looking at one of the greenhouses. We can see the hydroponic plants and the walls with the hydroponic plants and a little part of the water tank at the bottom. And the station, there was one diagram that we a little bit skipped, but the station is not supposed to on its own clean the entire ocean. It is quite small in size. It is 100 meters what we see on the screen in the width, and it's 40 meters above the water surface and 60 meters under. So when we are looking at the waste, it's currently only in, for example, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which should be, the sizes of few times France. I'm from Slovakia, so I compare it to 28 times Slovakia. So this tiny station would not be able to kind of collect all of the waste on its own. So the idea was that it would exist in clusters of stations where the one would be, carrying the all of the back of house and all of the support facilities for the crew, and then the rest of them would be really just for collecting the waste, recycling it on board, and with that as well we would create a lesser impact on the water. So this is somehow the big idea, it's a very large project which is combining a lot of different technologies as well. When we are talking about cleaning the water, when we are talking about desalination, the hydroponics, but as well the station should be really a self-sustainable station on the ocean. So it is with the barrier which is navigating the water, is as well collecting the energy from the waves, because there are hydraulic joints between the parts of the barrier. It's collecting a solar energy thanks to integrated solar panels in the greenhouses. Now we have beautiful solar panels. Those are not like, the sheets that maybe on all of the houses in Europe, but they can be really integrated into the glass, and they can still allow the sun to go through. There can be as well a secondary use of wind turbines to gain energy, and as I was talking about the hydroponic cultivation, as well halophilic plants, those like actually salty water, can be harvested on the plant to create a biofuel. So the station is really trying, to kind of connect all of these large topics. Those are not so it's not just only about the cleaning, the separation of the waste, and this recycling, but it's about as well studying how we can look at the problem of the dirty water, the problem maybe of how as well we as a humanity have to look more towards the water, as well as we can inhabit it and create these self-sustainable stations on it. So it's interesting challenge, I would say.
Just this is really it's amazing. I'm totally about all by it. The one thing that is constantly in the back of my mind, I think, God, that must be expensive. I mean, this is all very custom made. It's kind of it's the latest sort of computer aided design panels. Surely this must cost like a lot. I mean, what is the kind of you're thinking on the cost side of this?
I don't like to talk about the cost, because you cannot give a price tag on the sustainable part of it, that we will clean the ocean. But somehow, like in the big numbers, I would say. I come from a building industry. I'm an architect, and I work most of the time on skyscrapers. And a skyscraper of 250-meter height will be of a comparable cost to
Okay.
So, or it might be a bit more expensive. It depends on how well really I would be able with the engineers to develop the structure that can float, like what are the problems with that. But when we are comparing it to similar boats of these sizes, there are many boats, those are even bigger. Those are right now on the water, or we are comparing it to currently to the skyscrapers. It is not a cost that would be radically different.
How many people would be permanently stationed on this station?
I was thinking about 50 members crew, because it should not be a station for vacation. I get often this thing like, yeah, that would be really good, as a business model. So you can offer it for people to have vacation and they can make money. But I think that's not the idea of the project, because with that you would increase, the pollution of the water, because you have to transport the people there, and it would not be about the cleaning it so much as it would be about entertainment. So that's why the 50 member crew, it's not big, but it is kind of sustainable as well, considering how much water we need to clean, we need to desalinate, how much plant we can grow, what is the size of the water tank. So as well that the station can really sustain them nutrition wise on its own without bringing extensive amounts from the shore. So 50 members.
So if you're sort of saying that for this to be really as effective as you would like it to be, you would see a cluster of these cleaners, I call them, or whatever, of these kind of floating stations. But of course, not all of them would have the kind of the quarters, the living quarters, and all the other aspects. So the others would be pared down, but they still would have the cleaning functionality.
Exactly.
But would you have to increase the number of people working on the station if you increase the number of the size of the cluster?
I don't think so. I think anyway it would be more technology driven. So it would be more like smart technologies and AI and robotics and all of these. And anyway, the filtration of the water as well. The filtration plants we know from the world, it's not heavily operated by humans. It's a lot of industry equipment.
And
So
there's an education center, you were saying, or could be an education center
yes.
there as well. Would that be mainly to broadcast from there, or would you invite students onto the station to be educated on the station?
I would like to invite the students. So this would be part of the crew that it's kind of changing. So what I was thinking is maybe 2-3 weeks, kind of seminars on board where the students can as well do some research, can test something, can help kind of the permanent researchers, and can better get to know. Of course, I mean, if there would be if there are the researchers, broadcasting would be possible. Of course, a part of it now we all are, into podcasts and everything. So it definitely would be nice. But the idea was to offer this to the researchers because I believe there is a need. I as well heard from some people that are studying the oceans that there is a need. There is it's important as well for the researchers to kind of test what is the quality of the water, how is the life behaving when we start to clean it. I think it would be important to see how effective is really the station, or as well try to find out a new principles or how we can really recycle the waste, if we can, and to what extent we can do it on board, and improve this process over the years, because this should be like a hub where you can try these new technologies and you can develop farther, because of course there is some knowledge we have now, but what we can do with all of this knowledge when we can apply it in the middle of the ocean and continue developing it.
There's two kind of sort of if you like, organizations, existing organizations that are kind of in, when you talk, that kind of come back to me, that I feel have a certain similarity. One, of course, is the International Space Station, which is also, again, it's used by, indeed, even at this very point, by Russians and Americans, and apparently they got on quite well in space. And of course, and it is used by others as well. And they essentially use it as a kind of, as a research station, a shared facility. I don't know how they're organized, so incorporated, what the actual form is there, organizational form. But I know the other one that comes to mind is CERN, which is the particle accelerator in Switzerland. Which is organized a bit like the EU as an international organization, with states, with nations becoming members and then sending their scientists there. Have you any thoughts about how you would incorporate this, how this could work? Would this be a public sector or a private sector initiative? Would this be like many governments, like an international organization, or would this be led by a single government or a nation? What is your thoughts on that?
To me, it was more meant like something open, like a platform where private companies could come, researchers from universities, or a state-driven organization could come, because it would be a unique platform. So I don't think it should be just for one entity, but I think this would be also more driven by when I will be enough happy to get the investments. So this would as well depend on what is then the model of the investors. But I would imagine it to be more broadened.
It's really an amazing project. I mean, and I have a sort of a bit of a split personality, that in part of my life I'm also involved in the arts, and in another part I'm involved in democracy and business related initiatives. And one of the things that I come across all of these domains is that people very often are quite frightened of large ideas, because the large idea is kind of, it commits you to something, at least in the public that you may not be able to realize because it may be too big, too ambitious, too expensive. I mean, there's 1,000 ways of killing a cat, as they say. And certainly, if anybody would want to have a go at kind of killing this project, I'm sure there would be plenty of opportunity. How do you gather the courage, and what makes you kind of conceive of such large projects? What's your reasoning, or how do you kind of justify that, for yourself?
When you were talking about, these two parts, the art and somehow the politics as well, I actually have to tell you a story. So last year, the Minister of Environment of Slovakia, he found this project very exciting, and he as well enabled me to exhibit it at the Dubai Expo. It was fantastic. But when we had the first meeting, he said something what I think nicely describes it. That, for example, waste is is a topic that we as a humanity, we don't like to talk so much about it. We want to always hide it. It's not a topic you're gonna go for coffee with your friends and discuss.
Because we don't really have a solution for it, don't we? It's one of these problems that if we make this a political project, we dig a hole for ourselves, don't we?
Yeah. But it actually, this project, because it is a nice design, and that through that design, it's kind of opened this possibility to discuss the waste more. And this is what is important for me on this project. And I think what is important in architecture, maybe we as architects, we don't use it so often, is that we have the possibility to bring in the maybe sometimes crazy, maybe sometimes large projects. Those might not become a reality, but we can bring them to the public, and we can start with them these larger discussions that can create a change. And maybe I will never build it. I don't know. I really can't say. It is a possibility, quite a large one, but the project opened up the discussion. It was discussed all around the world, and I'm very excited about it, and I'm excited that it had this kind of impact on people. I'm excited that kids from schools are sending me their projects about this station, and how are they implementing more recycling into their everyday life. And this is the educational part of the project that kind of took on before the project is built, and I think that it's very exciting.
There is a it's a kind of a fine line, isn't it, between kind of trying to keep it as a something that we want to think in terms of real, rather than it being a fantasy, because of course there is always this danger that we kind of drift into the realm of science fiction, and then we sort of lose touch. And it's then very difficult to use it in critical discourse. But I think you're trading a very fine line, and I find it very exciting. Also, especially at the moment where we do not really have so many positive versions of the future that are actually taking into account the real problems we're facing. They all tend to be quite dystopian. I mean, wherever we look, and so, I mean, it's interesting. I mean. You say you are mainly in high rise. Of course, high rise, a lot of people would sort of say it's not the most environmentally friendly building solution. But of course, there's also other arguments that that you could put against it. But it is certainly something that people debate. Whether you should build up or out or down, and all these kinds of things. Where does it sit in your own professional practice? Is this sort of an outlier? Is this something that or are you trying to bring the kind of environmental concerns that are reflected in the 8th continent? Are you trying to bring that to your other building work as well?
In my everyday work, and like in the practice I work for, we always consider sustainability, sustainable principles. We look at the materials of the building, we look at ventilation, solar, everything that's there, and we look at how to implement it and make our buildings better, performing better, more resilient, and that they have a higher longevity. And it is important, definitely, at this day and age. it is important for every architect. And if
But
it
do
is
you
not,
think, I think,
it
let
will.
me rephrase it. Do you think we are sort of getting to a point where, if you like, let me call it, for the lack of a better word, green architecture, would provide an architect with a competitive edge? Or are we still at a point where it's a sort of a secondary consideration, where square footage and yield and these kinds of traditional measures are still very much in the forefront? What is your sort of sense there? Where are we moving? Where's architecture moving at the moment?
I think it is at the forefront. The sustainability is really important. And as well right now, we as architects, we have a lot of certificates that, we need to achieve, and the clients are pushing us to achieve. And these are all like the green certificates for the buildings. And that is as well about like the materiality, the management of the building, the maintenance, and so on and so forth. And it is really important. And it's the same important as for architects, that for the clients, that they can see that, how is their building performing in the years. And there is there is a big difference, I think, as well, in the understanding what we might have understood 10, 20 years before. What is a green building? What is, sustainable building? It doesn't mean that it has to be kind of a return to very basic design solutions. Today it is about, understanding better the shapes, understanding better the performance of the building, going towards the new materials. And it is very exciting. And it's definitely the forefront.
If you think about the eighth continent as and I found that a really interesting approach. If you think about it as, if you like, as an icebreaker, as a as a discussion starter, then of course, what would be quite interesting is if one in the discussion wouldn't lose sight of the actual project, because of course, both from an architecture point of view, but also from a personal point of view, surely it would be a huge triumph if this thing was going to be built at some point, wouldn't it? It would be really nice. So kind of, is there a way for you to keep them together without sort of losing your audience? In other words, if you're talking to, if you were to talk to Elon Musk, and is known for kind of extravagant projects, and he would sort of say, well, yeah, it's great, but we have to halve the cost. Just as an example, yeah. Would this be for you a deal breaker, because you would have to then really rethink the concept, or would you be happy to engage in this kind of discourse? In other words, would you be prepared to take the project along, almost as if that it starts a discussion, but it kind of goes beyond that, in a sense that it then adjusts, so that, because the discussion, if the object of discussion remains static, then the discussion at some point will run its course and it'll be done. Everything will be discussed about that structure. But if the structure evolves alongside the discussion and takes these ideas on board, then surely one could sort of wonder whether there is an opportunity for a large participatory project, if you know what I'm trying to get at.
Yes. So for me, it's very important that the design would develop. And I see this in my everyday practice. And, of course, budget is a big question. And there are always going to be a cost cut, and there are going to be replacement of materials, and there are going to be rationalization. And this is, just part of everyday life. And I think as architects, we should not be, and we are not really afraid of it. We are still trying to always sustain the design and the design intent as much as we can, and it's really important. But I think it's important that as well that the design develops with knowing more about the technology, knowing more about the structure. And I think this is, for me, actually the very exciting part to kind of moving forward with the eighth continent, to have the engineers on board and to be able to discuss with them how we could make it better, how maybe some geometry has to change, but that means that we can have much better technology for the cleaning or for the collecting of the trash. And a design that it's not informed by some different elements. It's not really a design, it's only art. So for a good design and architecture to really work, it has to have this feedback from the engineers and from the wider stakeholders.
And the wider stakeholders are the group that I'm kind of, I would count myself to the group of the wider stakeholders. And I find probably that to me probably would be the key to the project. I mean, for example, take universities. I mean, like going back to like CERN in Switzerland, I mean, it is a kind of an international organization. Yes, government or nations become members, but they do become members so that their universities and their businesses gain access to CERN and can do their physical experiments and their whatever like there, and send students here to do their PhDs and all the rest. So it's a sort of a kind of a research infrastructure that governments share. Same, of course, goes in some ways for the International Space Station. I kind of wonder, isn't that the kind of project where you would want to get like sort of the 10 leading universities of this world from the US, from Europe, from Asia, and so on together to say, well, how about, we form a consortium and see whether we can push this forward, not necessarily with the intention that exactly that floating station is going to come out in the end, but that a solution comes out in the end that meets the criteria that you have set out. Can you see this kind of process or something like that happen?
I think it definitely would be an interesting way how to, approach this problem, and how to maybe bring it the next step. And as you say, maybe the station would not be the outcome. Maybe there would be a different outcome to it. Maybe it would be about building, some different designs closer to the shore to kind of collect the trash before it kind of breaks to parts, because right now I had the station floating in the ocean in the garbage patch, where is already a kind of different state. So I think it would be exciting way how to approach it and discuss, with really the leading universities as well in the problematic of the water cleaning, or the ocean studies and so on and so forth, hydraulics, and kind of have a look with them at what could be the solution, and kind of inform back the design, or develop with them another solution in a different project.
I mean, I think this idea of it not just being a functional cleaning device, but to combine this with research and to combine this with other functions the way you've done, to me, it feels like that is part of the key, isn't it? It's part of getting people excited about this, and also sort of seeing it not just as a sort of a solution to a problem, but also a window to an opportunity. And I think to keep that in balance, to not think of it just as a problem, but to think of it in a forward-looking way as a window, I think that's exactly this. I think it's a very, very promising approach. Have you used this idea of architecture, as a sort of if you like, as an icebreaker, or as a sort of a starting point for discussion in other contexts?
I had another project which I would say had a twist like this, but there was a project which was looking at the Antarctica, and it was actually about creating a bioprospecting station in Antarctica, because there the problem was that, as the globe is getting warmer, actually the stations, those are for our seeds in I think it's Norway, I don't remember now, but they are having a problems to keep them enough cool down, because they need to use a lot of energy to do it now, as the global warming. So when I was looking at the bioprospecting station in Antarctica, it was about bringing on one hand the seed bank to Antarctica, because it is still the coldest point, but it's as well, there are starting to be researches in Antarctica because of as well ice melting there. There are becoming new seeds, viruses that we didn't know before. So bioprospecting is interesting for the location. But again, it's a large project, and it's a controversial topic, because Antarctica is as well part of the globe that we don't really want to touch or disturb. And but my approach was not to really disturb it. It was kind of bring there the seeds that we need to protect, because we may still need them, and they're very important for us. So it was somehow like to to protect them in the land where it's already protected. But as it might not be as well such an immediate problem, let's say now, the waste is a bigger of issue, and it's an issue that it's still kind of closer to us and we see now more immediately. And I think that's as well part of it why the project, the 8th continent, kind of took on a bigger dominance.
Is there some kind of any social structure? I don't want to say an organization, but are there people out there that have offered help? Is there kind of a support group? Are there kind of like, say, engineers that have kind of just contributed some time to kind of solve problems? Do you have sort of a community surrounding this project? And is there any kind of ongoing kind of dialogue within that community? Is this or how do you what's the status of the project at the moment?
So I started to discuss with few of the companies, and I had this really large, great opportunity at the Dubai Expo to, meet with few of them. Those are, dominant in the water cleaning and purifying, and this is very important for the station. So there are some discussions. There are discussions with universities. Those are as well, engaged with engineering, so to see how their students could be engaged within this project, and how we can start with some smaller tasks to address these different issues. So I think the support group is starting to form. It's forming, and it is interesting to see, and hopefully it will be able to develop farther and farther over the next year.
I mean, you have plenty of experience with large scale projects, and I guess you develop a sort of a sixth sense of how when kind of the slow movement turns into standstill. How would you describe the project at the moment? I mean, what's your sort of like your perfect timeline? I mean, of course, it's something. I'm not trying to nail it down to anything, but just to get a sense of how far away we are from seeing something form. But with like say a skyscraper, you would be talking anything 5 to 20 years, wouldn't you? I mean, it could be a long time before a large building or an airport or whatever. I mean, they can take, the airport in Berlin took, forever to build. So what kind of, like on your own private timeline, how do you see this? I mean, in a perfect ideal world, how do you see this develop? Would this be done by 2030, by 2040, by 2050? Where do you see this go?
It's a good question. And, as you say, the projects, like architecture projects, they have a very different timelines, from 5 years to 20 and so on. But as well, when, what I'm used to from my experiences on the skyscrapers, let's say just the project development would be around 5 years, and then it's starting the construction period. And this is somehow what I would expect on this. I think 5 years to be somehow the timeline to have the project developed, to be able to have this discussion about the technologies, to have the first prototypes run, to to really go on the water and build something smaller scale and develop the materials. I think the 5 years is the minimum, and then we would start about the construction.
So I mean, a lot of people talk about this window we have with climate change, actually a lot of things. People sort of say similar things about the European Union as well, funnily enough, like in terms of reform and all the rest. We seem to have at a point of, radical or fundamental change in so many areas. And there's a sort of kind of sense that we have a sort of a 10-year window, well, between now and 2030, 35. I mean, that kind of where we have to meet certain climate targets, where certain reforms in Europe have to happen, where we have to get a handle on proliferation of, weapons of mass destruction. There's so many issues where we sort of feel there's a sort of a window. If we don't basically get things under control within that time frame, then they could really derail. from what you're saying, and I think plastics is a similar kind of, it falls into a very similar time frame, really. So from what you're saying is we're not too late for this. So we're on this timeline. So given a sort of a sense of urgency and given this kind of awareness that these things now need to happen, it seems to me that if the right people get on board and if, capable people coordinate this, that this may well happen within a 10-year time frame.
I think so. I think it's possible, as you say, but there is one another aspect that is kind of a bit more political that I think we have to as well engage to this station be really as successful, as it should be in cleaning the ocean, and that the waste management all around the globe has to change. Because if we just create these stations and we have them out in the ocean and they, gather the debris, but if we don't stop bringing the debris to the oceans, there is no chance for them to just clean it. There has to be the stop, and this stop has to be political. So there is, there has to be these two steps. On one, we have to clean the water, but we have as well to kind of change the mentality already. Yes, at the point when we started cleaning the water, but the better would be before we do it. So we kind of really manage to not have this enormous amount of waste coming to the water.
But the beauty about your project, of course, is that it addresses both of those dynamics, isn't it? It helps us to shape our thinking about the future and to think in terms of the changes that we need to make possible in our lifestyles and our way of looking at the world and the way we sort of exploit the world, our sort of extractive kind of mentality on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have to clean up our mess. And in a way, this project beautifully deals with those two aspects. Why should I change my way of being when the future is just hell? So if we cannot have a positive, like a desirable, a sort of aspirational vision of the future, then obviously change is going to be much more difficult. And of course, the station itself also provides, if you like, a platform where some of this debate, certainly could crystallize. I mean, obviously, it needs to be much wider than just focused on this particular project. But this project would be one of those sort of lighthouses, that would emanate, the kind of the sort of the attitudes and the kind of the awareness that we need to move through this period of change. So in terms of your thinking about sort of, do you have any sort of particularly next steps that are kind of that you're sort of contemplating what you should or what could be done next for this project to have a sort of to move forward? Are there any kind of specific steps that you are planning or that you would like to see happen?
For me, it's the development with the engineers, the development of the technology. And I think this is really crucial to as well make this project viable to, the investors. If I would be able not only, to get it in a theoretical way, but to get as well to the building of the first prototypes, that would be somehow, my target to do this as soon as possible to, be able to start the discussions with the investors and start to build bigger mock-ups and bigger models and maybe small stations. Those could, kind of start to clean onshore and kind of with that moving towards the ultimate goal.
Just one question that I just remember somebody asked me, and I'm sure that there may be quite a few viewers that wonder that as well. That station, how will it make sure that it doesn't suck in fish and other living organisms? I mean, in other words, that it doesn't kind of that it only takes out debris and not the good stuff, be it jellyfish, be it fish, other things that should stay in the water. Are there filters built in, or how does this work?
So the one of the first ideas was that in general kind of the trash is in the top level layers of the water. This is where usually the fishes are not.
Oh, okay. So it's at the
yeah. So it's at the top layer, and then there would be as well like a netting So it would protect, to certain depth, so that the fishes will not go close to the mechanism that is sucking the water. And then there would be different filters. So I think it would be also possible, maybe at the first filters to be somehow able to, in case there is still some living organism, to make sure to kind of return it back to the ocean. But this is one of the technologies that is, it's so crucial, and it will be so interesting to, develop with the engineers closer. I don't have a company yet that, I'm in discussion about this particular technology, but I think we can definitely find the solutions.
Yeah, I mean, because it's like I think there's sort of probably almost an opportunity also for artificial intelligence, isn't there? Because there may be a way of sort of active filtering, and so it's quite interesting this question: how do you make sure that you only filter out the debris and not the other stuff?
I think this would be as well a very crucial question, when we would look into how to actually clean the sea bottom, because this is very difficult, and there it would be more about, suction and really getting the trash from the depth of the sea, and there it could be more problematic about, how is it destroying really the seabed. The project is not looking at that, but it was, something what I was looking at as a next step as well, because when we are looking at the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, I have again the comparisons in the size of Slovakia, but I think it was around, so there is a 28 times the area of Slovakia on the top layer, but there is 65 times area of Slovakia on the bottom of the seabed. So there is enormous amount of trash which we will have even bigger problem to remove, and that needs another solution too, and that is a challenging one, and I think even more than the one to remove it from the top layer.
So one last question, and this is a question that this is something I have sort of noticed with other people also on Reboot, have come up with very innovative solutions, but they have not come through a movement like a social movement or an environmental movement, but they have come to it, for example, from a business perspective as business people. And they found that the movements weren't necessarily as supportive as they had initially hoped. What is your experience been in kind of taking this into taking it to the public? Did you have a very welcoming, a very warm kind of reception from the environmental lobby, like the Greenpeaces of this world, or what is the kind of how do they respond to this?
I don't know if I talked with Greenpeace, and if I did, I'm very sorry, but I am not exactly sure with those if I spoke. I spoke with many interesting organizations within the last 2 years, and I had most of the time a good feedback. I don't think many people would come to me and really criticize it. It's and I think it's also different if you are really doing something what is business driven. This is not really for now a business driven project. I mean, the premise is to clean the ocean and to start a discussion and to everything what we just talked about. And so maybe that's why the society.
But do you have, I mean, for example, I mean, surely this could be quite a sort of a stepping stone project, and it could, as not just start the discussion, but be an active first step to do something about a very concrete problem. Have you had offers of support, be it on the fundraising side, being on the marketing side, be it on the kind of awareness building side, from WWF, from any of the big global environmental sort of charities? Has there been any response, like, say, from the environmental agency at the UN? And there's other kind of environmental organizations who essentially would be in the same business, if you like. Have there been kind of helpful? I mean, yeah, people, it is a really exciting project, but did their kind of response go beyond that? So they said, well, let us help you, or in any way, or what's the relationship there?
I have to say I have a great support from the Slovak Ministry of Environment and Environmental Agency, and they enabled me the Dubai Expo, and they are supporting the project and in exhibiting it, and so that would for me be like from the big organizations you just mentioned. That is one of the biggest one. I'm as well the Ocean Advocate, what is part of the European Union program. So I have a support there, and it's more like a youth forum where many of the projects those are kind of concerned about the quality of water and cleaning the water. And for now it is at this stage. So I hope by the time there would be someone from the organization you met or you mentioned, and maybe they would be interested in the project.
There's one organization that also I think it kind of I keep going on one individual and organization that I wonder, and that's Charles Schwab, the World Economic Forum, because that of course would be a platform where this project would sit quite comfortably. Have you had any contact with the World Economic Forum about this? Maybe to present it there next February or something, or maybe to get some support.
When you mentioned the World Economic Forum, actually from the informal World Economic Forum, I received the Peace Prize for this project. What was a beautiful award, and nice. I really appreciate it. So yeah, there are various supports from organizations.
Excellent. Well, this is amazing. If any architecture student or young architect is inspired by this and wants to come up with their own scheme, what would be your word of advice to them?
With their own scheme for
their own kind of structure or their own kind of architectural project to, if you like, get a discussion started on that scale, like a large, ambitious project like yours?
Yeah, so I think the important thing is, how you position it within the real world, and to look as well at the technologies and how it can, be comparable to what we know already now. And this is as well interesting about the 8th continent, because we have right now hydroponic cultivation. We have right now ways how to purify water and how to desalinate it, and how to do everything what I just mentioned, the hydraulic joints for collecting the wave energy, the solar panels integrated into the glass. All of the elements I integrated to a certain extent are out there. They would need, some changes to kind of fit to this special case study, but it is not just something out of the blue that it's not relatable to. So I think that it's important for the students of architecture to start to, when they start to develop their project, to look at what is out there and try to position the project within the real world.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. This has been a really interesting conversation. And I can really only hope that this project is going to move forward, that we hear loads about it in the years to come. If people want to know more about it, your website is lenkapetrakova.com, isn't it?
Yes.
So they can go there, they can find information there. Are there any other information sources that you think people should have an eye on?
I actually update my Instagram quite often. I don't know if there's a reliable source of information.
Okay.
But I have Instagram where I post a lot about the exhibitions of these projects, and the publication of the projects or any development with that. So if people are interested, it is Lenka Petrak on Instagram, and they can find there some more about the project, and definitely more than what is on my webpage right now.
And if it just so happens that we have a serious investor or institutional policymaker or somebody who could actually really help you at a senior level to move this project forward, would these people contact you through the website or through Sada Hadid, or how would people get in touch with you?
They can contact me through my website. There is a contact form, but they can also write me on my email, and it's Petrakova at now I have to tell it right, the8continent.org.
Excellent. Okay, so well, what I will do is maybe if you send me all the kind of the Instagram and these once more by email, I will link that then to this video so that people can have the links on the video here as well if they look at it later.
Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope the viewers, learn something interesting.
It's been a great pleasure. It's been a great pleasure, and most importantly, it's been really amazing to meet you and to find out who this amazing person is behind this great project. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day. Bye-bye.